Day 1300 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 1,096,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 910 in the past day. Then as for hardware, no tanks, 5 APVs, 26 artillery, 2 rocket launchers, and could you believe it? Another strike on an oil refinery, and what's shaping up to be a second one at that, which takes us to the map with another flurry of kinetic sanctions anti-relief that traveled into Russia overnight. And starting off where Ukraine's Special Operations Forces struck Russia's Saratov oil refinery, igniting fires that burned for more than 3 hours. The refinery saw damage to western storage tanks and processing units, confirmed by satellite imagery showing smoke plumes and heat signatures, which leads to this latest blow, marking the second Ukrainian strike on the Saratov facility since last month on August 10th, for a crucial refinery that produces over 20 types of fuel, including gasoline and diesel that directly supplies Russia's military. The Russian Ministry of Energy later reported the fire had been contained by early morning. Still, refinery throughput is expected to be cut by about 15% coming out of this latest strike, where authorities estimated up to 10 days before full capacity could be restored, though they are known for providing some significantly reduced timelines on these matters. And it's clearly an important site as well, given we can see the red tracer rounds from autocannons firing off, with those air defenses positioned directly adjacent to the site. How did the 3-day SMO come to this? Then also this morning, and visited by another wave of combat mosquitoes for a 5th time this year, Ukrainian drones struck again at the Kostovo oil refinery in Nizhny Novgorod, with local reports detailing explosions and fires inside the sprawling Lukoil complex. More details are still to come through, but the site has become one of the most persistently targeted refineries in Russia for 2025, illustrating an impressive level of sustained pressure, given its location of about 800 kilometers or about 500 miles from the Ukrainian border. And so the fuel crisis continues to show, with fuel shortages seen in locations adjacent to Ukrainian-controlled lands, such as the neighboring Belgorod Oblast, and as is the case with gas stations in occupied Crimea that don't have gasoline, with this example of a Russian soldier posting their desperate search for a pint of gas on an empty tank, asking for suggestions on locations to fill up, but only if the respondents know for sure, because, as this guy says, he may not have enough in the tank to make it to 2 gas stations. So all in all, for most recent times, Ukraine has now conducted 19 successful strikes on 14 Russian oil refineries in 45 days. This represents about 43% of all major refineries in Russia, of which about 25% of that capacity has gone offline, becoming a level of disruption that is both staggering and unprecedented. Now to Bryansk, where it was shown that a Ukrainian drone made a successful landing on a cell broadcast antenna in Suzemka. Well, a successful landing by way of a mission accomplished for a one-way drone anyway. The hit knocked out communications in the area, and Russian sources themselves noting local networks had gone offline. The antenna forms part of a communications hub linked into Russia's regional command and control, so disabling it means units on the ground struggle to receive orders, leaving them effectively cut off at potentially critical moments. Then headed up the map to Moscow, but in a change of pace, as the capital is seeing the rise of a new form of intimidation dressed up as community policing. Under the Kremlin's watch, so-called Russian community patrols have begun roaming the streets at night. Their stated aim, catching migrants and harassing naturalized citizens who hold Russian passports but belong to ethnic minority groups. Further unsettling is that these vigilante patrols don't just target outsiders. They're unnerving ordinary Muscovites too, with residents expressing deep concern. So, ironically, instead of reassurance, their presence adds another layer of fear in a city already dominated by security forces, because nothing says safety like roving mobs at night. This looks like a dystopian nightmare. I mean, put almost any group of people together at night in a mob formation and give them the power of enforcement linked to the Kremlin, then that's just a recipe for disaster. Looks like Moscow is now on permanent curfew. Then lastly, on this map, headed all the way over to Russia's Vladivostok, with reports of explosions ripping through a Russian military facility early this morning, shaking the Shitovaya district and drawing an immediate heavy security response. Roadblocks were set up, FSB units moved in, with cars stopped and searched in the paranoia. Officials played down the event, but Ukrainian intelligence sources, by contrast, were blunt, stating that it was a targeted operation by the HUR against the headquarters of the 155th Separate Guards Marine Brigade, a unit infamous in its role for some of the most brutal fighting of the war, from Kyiv's outskirts to Mariupol, Vuhledar, Kursk, and more recently, Pokrovsk. For Russia, the timing and location sting. Vladivostok sits at the far eastern edge of the country, thousands of miles away from Ukraine's border, home to Pacific Fleet assets and elite units considered untouchable by outside strikes. With this event very likely resulting from a case of some sabotage activity. Now to the main map, where signs of a tightening noose are emerging, with reports from Russian telegram channels that point to Alexivka in Ukraine's Sumy region, where local occupiers warn that the situation is spiraling and being described by soldiers on the ground as nothing short of a looming disaster of an encirclement. One widely shared message summed it up, quote, "In Alexivka, everything is going to, let's call it an operational encirclement for now. But in human terms, the guys are already on the brink of disaster." End quote. Which all means this could mark another potential cauldron forming, an encirclement that threatens to trap Russian troops in the area, exposing them to the very kind of battlefield collapse Moscow has worked hard to avoid publicizing. Now to the Central Eastern Front, where, in fact, some of the AFU's Sumy forces have been repositioned to in recent weeks, as Ukraine reports progress around the Dobrapilla sector, with a number of Russian pockets that continue shaping up to be sealed off. Local accounts suggest hundreds of Russian troops could now be cut off, with retreat requests reportedly denied by their commanders. Some Ukrainian sources even hint at the possibility of mass surrender, though confirmation remains fluid there. Now, further details suggest Ukrainian troops also advanced in Mayak, adding pressure on overstretched Russian units that are being shifted piecemeal from their 8th Army, as opposed to sending in whole organized units, which suggests the resorting to a gap-filling approach, shuffling in fragments where they can. But the fog of war looms large here, as it's virtually impossible to get an accurate, detailed map of this front right now, and while anything is possible for the location, the map points to AFU encirclements and advances, or continued advances and encirclements, and where the overall existing dynamic tilts against Moscow. So looking at a map from a month ago, these former Russian bunny ear control points have faded away, and what was meant to be a Russian push in August is now being spoken of by both soldiers and analysts as a dangerous overextension for the invaders, at a side of continued trickle-in freshly minted Russian POWs, with a chance for many dozens more. Then as for occupied Donetsk, Russian propagandist Saryov has admitted that the Kremlin has no intention of restoring water supplies to the Russian-controlled region. Instead, he said that the crisis is being leveraged to push residents into voluntary resettlement in Siberia. The remarks echo Stalin-era policies of forced deportations, dressed up today as humanitarian relocation. With basic infrastructure left in ruin and no effort to repair it, Moscow appears to be using deprivation itself as a weapon of control. So it's interesting how the Kremlin insists that Donbass residents are Russian, yet when it comes to relocation, it's not Moscow or St. Petersburg or even Volgograd, but coerced exile to Siberian colonies. Then to the southwest of the map, an additional bout of destroyed Russian armor was noted, coming by way of a Ukrainian anti-tank guided missile near Malatokmaka on the Tokmak axis, caught during a retreat from its combat position. And this type of getaway failure on this very front has happened before. We saw it about 4 weeks ago. Then looking around the map, the AFU took aim at the crew of a Russian 107mm multiple launch rocket system Type 75, so these are the North Korean supplied pieces, with these actions performed as part of a counter-battery operation using FPV kamikaze drones. The Russian crew fired off a volley of 5 or 6 rockets, all caught on recon drone cam, and it is at that time that the AFU's FPV operators arrived. Sights set on this shorter-ranged, less powerful launcher and its crew of 4 sent packing into the next-door warehouse, along with their 8-kilometer or 5-mile ranged North Korean kit that inherently includes the vulnerability of needing to operate far too close to the front lines, making it far too easily spotted in today's age of drone warfare. Also on the map, we saw some of the detection and elimination of Russian ground loitering drones running on fiber optics, taken out by the Unmanned Systems Battalion, with most, if not all of these ground loitering placements difficult to not spot, and just all around far too poorly concealed. Then to the news, with Brussels weighing a novel workaround to channel frozen Russian state assets toward Ukraine without crossing the legal barriers of outright confiscation. As such, EU deputy finance ministers are now back with a plan to support Ukraine using something called reparation loans. This mechanism would see the interest it generated from the roughly 210 billion euros in frozen Russian central bank reserves, most parked at Euroclear, used as collateral for EU-issued zero-coupon bonds. Those IOUs, guaranteed by member states, would front-load billions in support to Kyiv while sidestepping accusations of unlawful seizure of Russian capital. If this measure passes, Ukraine would benefit immediately, while repayment would be tied to future reparations from Moscow. Right now, Ukraine only gains access to the interest revenue generated from the frozen Russian assets, but the new plan is to use that interest as collateral to raise a much bigger loan now, multiplying the financial firepower available for Ukraine without technically seizing the capital, at least for now. Now to some Ukrainian hardware news. Ukraine is about to get a massive upgrade to its drone toolkit, with a US-backed shipment of tens of thousands of AU strike or guidance kits. Specifically, Auterion, the US, German, Swiss drone software group, has a Pentagon-backed deal to deliver roughly 33,000 Skynode strike kits to Ukraine by the end of this year, where these kits are small modules that combine cameras, onboard compute, and radios to convert manually piloted FPV drones into visually guided, semi-autonomous weapons that can lock on and finish the last stage of a strike even when radio links are severed. But at the same time, Ukrainian industry is not standing still. Kyiv startups and established makers are already producing their own autonomy modules, just like the Skynode, and turning their popular frontline FPV frames into AI-assisted systems. So ultimately, we're looking at a combination of autonomy and scale, a force multiplier that combines the flexibility and range of a wireless quadcopter with the resistance to jamming offered through fiber optic alternatives, all enabled by a tiny high-tech add-on module. Then to a 5-second funny to round off the video today, as Russia is reportedly so short on air defenses, it wants to buy back its old S-400s from Turkey, the very same types that Ukrainian drones turned into barbecue kits in Crimea this summer. Ankara paid $2.5 billion for the two back in 2019, the two S-400 batteries, and now Moscow wants to get them back. The offer is reportedly under consideration by Turkey, so the Kremlin's grand rearmament master plan is pawn shop politics. Reclaim your own kit worth billions in price tag and not actual value given their poor performance, and giving Turkey the option for a refund on this overpriced lemon hardware. Even then, a successful transfer of two batteries wouldn't change the battlefield dynamic, just a more target-rich environment for Ukraine. And all in all, it's just a situation that reeks of desperation, that all feels like another Kremlin case of too little too late. And once again, how did the 3-day SMO come to this? Surely the Kremlin asks. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment. I'll see you down below, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!